It started innocently enough. Or at least, it looked that way. The kind of thing you chalk up to a careless teenager with more horsepower than sense. I was in the kitchen sipping my morning coffee when I heard that loud, stuttering engine. That always seemed a bit too angry for a quiet neighborhood like ours. I stepped out onto the porch, and there he was, some shaggy-haired kid wearing oversized sunglasses and a hoodie, revving the life out of his bike. Right on my lawn. He didn't look at me, didn't wave. He just dropped the kickstand, pulled off his helmet, and strolled across my grass like he owned the place. Then he cut across my driveway, hopped over a hedge, and disappeared through the side door of the house across the street, Karen's house. I didn't know her well back then, just the occasional forced smile during trash day, or her loud voice echoing during HOA meetings, always pushing for more control over community standards. Her son, apparently, had no interest in those standards or boundaries. The first time, I thought maybe he got confused. But then he did it again the next day, and the next, every time he came home from wherever he was. He'd use my yard as his shortcut/parking spot. His tires left deep grooves in the grass. The sound of his bike sent my dog into a frenzy every afternoon. But it wasn't until I saw the damage that I truly got angry. 3 days in, I walked outside and saw the carnage. My flower bed, the one I had spent 2 weekends cultivating, was wrecked, flattened, torn to shreds by thick tread marks. Petals and stems were strewn like battlefield debris. Right through the middle was a path carved out like a trail of disrespect. I walked over, crouched, and looked closer. The trail didn't curve. It didn't dodge. It went straight through deliberately. I stood up, looked across the street, and there he was again, sitting on the porch, snacking, smirking like a gremlin. Karen came out and handed him a drink. She looked at me but didn't wave, just smiled. The kind of smile that dares you to say something. That evening, I walked over and knocked. Karen answered, wearing a silk robe like she thought she was royalty. Yes. Your son's bike tore through my flower bed, I said plainly. He's been riding on my lawn for days. I need it to stop. She sipped from her drink, blinked slowly, and smiled with fake sweetness. He's a teenage boy. He's just expressing himself. You know how boys are. I said nothing. She continued, honestly, your lawn is right next to the sidewalk. You can't expect it to stay perfect. Maybe you should install a fence or something. I stared at her. So he is doing it on purpose. She shrugged. Boys will be boys. Then she closed the door on me. The next morning, I woke up to find not 1 but 3 bikes parked on my lawn. The grass was chewed up, divots like landmines, and even tire marks on my front steps. One of the bikes had mud smeared across the seat, fresh mud. They weren't just ignoring me now. They were mocking me. I didn't yell, didn't threaten. I just watched. Every day I sat in my chair by the window and observed. They thought I was defeated, but I was planning. I started sketching out something, not with anger, but with intent. Every move, every step measured and precise. I wasn't just going to stop them. I was going to make them wish they'd never touched my property, and it would start soon. There's a difference between anger and strategy. I knew if I lashed out, they'd paint me as the crazy neighbor, the old guy who hates kids, the villain in Karen's little HOA drama. But I wasn't interested in shouting matches. I wanted something permanent. So while they kept tearing up my lawn like it was a dirt track, I stayed calm. I pretended to ignore them. I even nodded once when Karen's son zoomed past me, his back while flinging clumps of mud across my driveway. He looked back at me like he'd just won a race. That was the last time he smiled. I started small. First, I installed a set of low-voltage motion sensor cameras, discreet, nestled behind shrubs, attached to corners of my porch. They blended right in. Every angle of my lawn was now covered. Every tire mark, every smirk, every off-road joyride documented. Next, I called a landscaper buddy of mine and asked him to deliver something unusual. 3 large pallets of landscape rocks, sharp-edged, dense. Not enough to fill the yard, just enough to cover a very specific area with a decorative purpose. We arranged the rocks along the sides of the lawn exactly where the tire tracks had been appearing. Just enough to look aesthetic, but uncomfortable to drive across. That same afternoon, I staked a tiny wooden sign into the grass, hand-painted in all caps, "New landscaping in progress. Please do not enter." I knew they wouldn't listen. That was the point. 2 days later, I reviewed my footage from that morning. I clicked play. There it was, Karen's son riding straight across the rocks, full speed. The bike wobbled hard. His rear tire slipped and smacked against a decorative boulder. He lost control for a second, then kept going. But he wasn't smiling this time. That evening, I walked outside casually just as Karen pulled into her driveway in her polished SUV. She didn't even get out before launching into her speech. "Did you seriously put rocks on your yard?" she snapped, stepping out in heels too high for suburban pavement. My son almost got hurt. I tilted my head. "On my yard? They're sharp. They're dangerous. What if he falls?" I almost laughed. "Why is he driving over them in the first place?" She didn't answer that. She crossed her arms instead. "This feels targeted." "It is," I said, keeping my tone even. "Targeted toward keeping people off my property." "You're being unreasonable," she snapped. "Boys ride. That's what they do. You can't change that." I smiled. "But I can change my yard." That evening, she marched across to the hoe board. I watched from my porch as she waved papers, pointed at my house, and gave some impassioned plea like she was defending her kingdom. I knew the Hoa president, Tim. Good guy. He nodded a lot while she spoke. Then he called me. "Hey," Tim said, trying not to laugh. "She's claiming you're laying traps on your property." I chuckled. "Landscaping traps," she says. "You're deliberately making your lawn dangerous." I explained everything: videos, the damage, the behavior. I even offered to send clips. Tim sighed. "Look, you're within your rights." She's dramatic. "Just stay cool." I stayed cool. But that night, things escalated. A loud crash jerked me awake. I rushed outside and found it Karen's son's bike lying sideways near my porch. One of the rocks had clearly done its job. The front wheel was bent, and the headlamp had shattered. But he wasn't there. No lights on at Karen's place either. Just silence. Something had changed. For the first time, they weren't being loud. They were hiding. And that's when I knew this was no longer just a game to them. It was personal. Good. Because for me, it always had been. The next morning, I expected to find another mess on my lawn. Broken rocks, maybe spray paint. But what I saw instead made me pause. Nothing. The yard was untouched. Not a tire mark, not a scuff. Even the bent-up bike from the night before had vanished. My camera footage confirmed it at 3:17 a.m. 2 figures snuck onto my lawn and dragged the wrecked bike back across the street, like criminals returning to the scene. They were rattled. I could smell it. But when people like Karen lose control, they don't retreat, they reload. That evening, something strange happened. Tim from the Hoa called me again twice. I missed the first call, but the voicemail chilled me. "Hey, just a heads up, Karen submitted a formal complaint. Said your yard modifications are violating safety codes. She even mentioned something about your security cameras invading her family's privacy. We'll talk tomorrow. I replayed it. Twice. Privacy. Her son had been trespassing and tearing up my property for nearly 2 weeks. And now I was the threat. I pulled the footage and emailed everything to Tim. Tire marks, trampled flowers, the crash. Every smirk caught on camera. I attached it all in a neat little folder titled Evidence of Harassment. I copied to other HOA members just for fun. The next day, I got the knock. It wasn't Tim. It was Karen. She stood on my porch like she'd been rehearsing. One hand on her hip, the other clutching a printed stack of papers. Her sunglasses were back oversized and unnecessary under the cloudy sky. I thought I'd come speak to you directly, she said, like she was offering a favor. No need to make this uglier than it already is. I said nothing, just waited. She held up the papers like they were holy scripture. According to Section 5.3 of the HOA Guidelines, any hazardous modifications to a front-facing yard need approval. That includes rocks capable of damaging property. I didn't even blink. You're putting kids in danger, she continued. I've already spoken to 3 board members. If you don't remove the rocks by Friday, I'll be filing a formal neighborhood safety complaint. I tilted my head slightly. You mean the same rocks your son was warned not to ride over? The ones on my private property? She blinked but kept the smile. You're escalating things. No, I said. I'm responding. She shoved the paper toward me. If something happens again, it's on you. I didn't take the paper. If something happens again, it's going to be on camera. Like the last time. For a split second, her smile twitched. Just a little. That's when I knew. She didn't expect me to fight back with facts. She expected me to be emotional, to yell, to get scared. But I wasn't scared. I was calm, and that unnerved her more than anything. She left without another word. That night, it got quiet again. No revving engines. No Karen yelling across the lawn. No bikes parked like trophies in my grass stop, but that calm, it wasn't peace. It was the eye of the storm. Because just before midnight, I got an alert on my phone. My driveway camera triggered by motion. I opened the app, expecting another trespass. But what I saw made my stomach twist. Karen alone, standing on my lawn with a can of spray paint in her hand. A hoodie pulled tight over her head. She glanced around nervously, then bent down toward my porch steps. I watched in real time as she started writing something. On my property. On camera. And this time, she'd gone too far. The spray paint fumes were probably still fresh when I hit the record button on my phone and watched the footage again. Karen was crouched low on my front steps, hoodie drawn, gripping a neon orange can in one hand and a flashlight in the other. She wrote fast, like she'd practiced it. And when she stood up, I got a clear view of what she left behind. Creep scrawled in all caps across the concrete. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was angry, because I was smiling. I let her walk herself into this trap, and now she had no idea just how deep she'd fallen by sunrise. I had already sent the full video file to the HOA board, time-stamped and labeled. I included screenshots of her face when she pulled her hood back right before she walked off my lawn and strutted back across the street like she'd just pulled off a flawless heist. And then I did one more thing. I uploaded a muted, 15-second clip to a private neighborhood Facebook group. No captions, no edits. Just the video of a mysterious figure spray painting the word creep on someone's front steps. In the middle of the night. I didn't name names. I didn't need to. Within the hour, comments flooded in. Who the heck is vandalizing people's homes? Looks like Karen's house in the background. Wait, is that who I think it is? Someone needs to call the cops. Karen tried to do damage control fast. I saw her walking around the neighborhood later that day, wearing a flowy sun hat and forced grin, making awkward small talk with anyone who'd give her 2 seconds. But her smile was thin. Her eyes kept darting around. She knew the rumor mill was grinding. That evening, I got another call from Tim. Okay, wow, he said. That footage. It's clear as day. Has she said anything? I asked. She's claiming you faked it. I laughed. With what? A deepfake lab and a Karen actress? She's spiraling. He admitted. We're having an emergency board meeting. You should attend. I agreed. That night, the HOA meeting wasn't held at the clubhouse. It was on Zoom, like most these days. But even through a screen, you could feel the tension. Karen joined late. Her camera was off. Tim cleared his throat. We've reviewed submitted footage regarding an incident of property vandalism. We've confirmed the video is authentic. Karen's voice cut in, sharp and bitter. That doesn't prove anything. He's had it out for me from day one. Tim stayed professional. Karen, the footage shows you in possession of spray paint on someone else's porch, defacing private property. She went quiet. Another board member, Denise, spoke up. I've lived here 10 years. I've never seen anything like this. It's unacceptable. And then came the bomb. Effective immediately, Tim said, Karen, you're suspended from all HOA board activities pending a review. We're also recommending formal charges be considered. Per neighborhood bylaws and local law, she unmuted just to gasp. You're siding with him. No. Denise said coldly, we're siding. With proof. Karen left the call. Literally logged off. And that's when I realized it wasn't over. Because people like Karen don't fold. They snapped. Later that night, I got a knock at my door. Not Karen. Not her son, but a police officer. Sir, he said, holding a folder, we received a complaint. Karen says you've been harassing her son, and that your cameras are illegally aimed at her home. I stared at him. She wants to file a restraining order. I invited the officer inside, calmly, like we were old friends. He wasn't confrontational. If anything, he looked uncomfortable. Like he already knew the story didn't add up, but still had to go through the motions. She claims. You've been harassing her son, he said as he opened the folder. Also says your surveillance cameras are violating her family's privacy. I nodded slowly. Would you like to see the footage? He blinked. You have it ready? Every second. I led him to my laptop and pulled up a folder marked with dates and timestamps. There they were, videos of her son tearing through my yard, knocking over planters, spinning wheels on my flower beds. There was even a clip where he shouted, let's see if the old man likes this, before launching his bike over the curb. And then I showed the footage of Karen spray painting creep on my steps at 11:59 p.m. The officer leaned in, silent. She said I was harassing them. I said, but I've never stepped foot on their property. I've only documented what's happened on mine. The officer nodded slowly. You're well within your rights. The cameras are all facing your own yard. And honestly, he hesitated. This makes her complaint look like retaliation. He took a few screenshots, thanked me for my cooperation, and left with a promise to file accordingly. I didn't hear from him again after that. But Karen wasn't done. By the next morning, she'd posted a long rant on the neighborhood Facebook page. It was a mess of wild claims, targeted harassment, illegal spying, intimidation of a minor. She signed it off with a melodramatic line. We just want to feel safe in our home. That backfired fast. Neighbors, many of whom had already seen the video of her vandalizing my steps, weren't buying it. Karen, you literally spray painted his house. I saw your kid ride through his yard 3 times last week. How does he harass you by recording his own property? Maybe your son should stay out of people's lawns. The comments piled up. Dozens. Then hundreds. Karen deleted her post. And then something I didn't expect happened. Tim the Hoa president reached out again. There's more, he said, lowering his voice over the phone. Another neighbor came forward. Their kid said Karen's son has been daring other teens to ride the old guy's lawn track. I asked, apparently your lawn is now a local bike challenge. I laughed, but it wasn't funny. Karen's son had turned my property into a dare spot. And the others, they were just tagging along. Listen, Tim said, a few of us talked. We think it's time to get the HOA's legal rep involved. Not against you, against her. Vandalism, harassment, defamation. She's crossed multiple lines. That word, defamation, it rang in my ears. I'd kept quiet, patient, calculated. But now Karen was trying to rewrite the narrative using law enforcement, public forums, and social pity to flip the script. But the truth was already recorded, dated, archived, and soon it was going to be filed officially. I didn't want her arrested. I didn't want some ugly lawsuit. I wanted something worse. I wanted her to be seen for exactly what she was. No masks, no Hoa title, no sunglasses to hide behind, and soon she would be, for a few days. It was quiet again. The rocks stayed untouched. My cameras stayed still. Karen's blinds across the street remained closed, like the entire household had gone into hibernation. I almost started to believe they'd finally backed off. But people like Karen don't quit. They stew. They wait. And then they snap. It was Saturday afternoon. Sun high. Lawnmowers humming in the distance. Kids playing on the sidewalk. A regular day. Until the sound returned, the sputtering roar of that dirt bike. I stood up from my porch chair slowly. Heart already sinking. It wasn't just the son this time. There were 2 of them. His usual bike, and now a second rider, taller, older, with a GoPro strapped to his chest. I recognized the kid from down the block. Karen's son had found backup and worse, an audience. The lawn challenge had returned. They sped past the sidewalk and hit the yard hard, tires spitting grass and gravel. They zigzagged between the landscaping rocks like it was a slalom course, carving new tracks where green grass had just begun to heal. And then Karen's son veered right, toward the porch, toward the steps. My steps. He tried to help them, or maybe just skim over the edge for flair. But the bike caught on the corner, his tire clipped the top step, and the whole thing twisted sideways. I heard it before I saw it, the crash. Metal hitting concrete, plastic snapping. A loud, sharp yelp. The GoPro kid jumped off his bike and ran over. Karen's son was face down in the dirt, groaning, clutching his arm. The front of his bike was crumpled like a soda can. And I was already dialing. When the paramedics arrived, I stayed back. I watched from the porch as they loaded him onto a stretcher. Karen came running out of her house 10 minutes too late, shouting, sobbing, acting like she had no idea what had happened. Her performance was flawless. High-pitched concern, panicked questions, arms flailing at anyone in uniform. But what she didn't realize was this. I had everything. The whole crash, from start to finish, was captured onto angles. My motion sensor cameras. And, ironically, the GoPro footage her son's friend forgot to turn off before abandoning his bike and running. Later that night, I emailed everything to the Hoa, the local police department, and the neighborhood Facebook group. The caption was simple. This is why we don't let entitled children treat private property like a playground. It didn't take long. By morning, the clip had gone semi-viral, at least locally. Shared in community forums, reposted by nearby neighborhood groups, and commented on by people who didn't even live here. This was bound to happen. The kid could have killed himself, and the parent wants to sue him. Karen's been letting this slide for too long. Karen tried to spin it again, claimed I'd set a trap, told a local news blogger her son had been lured onto the property. She even held a little meeting at her house with a few of her loyal HOA buddies. But no one came, because by now, everyone had seen the truth. And Karen, she was unraveling. The next day, a for sale sign went up on her lawn. But I knew better. That wasn't surrender. That was desperation. And I wasn't done watching just yet. The for sale sign went up with Karen's usual flair, oversized, glossy, and mounted slightly crooked, like everything else she touched. The listing went live online the same day, described with words like peaceful community, friendly, neighbors, and ideal for families. The irony could have knocked a man flat. But while Karen planned her escape, I was piecing together something darker. It started with a knock at my door. It was Mason, Tim's nephew, about 16. Quiet, smart kid. He looked nervous, shifting on his feet like he wasn't sure if he should even be here. "Can I talk to you?" he asked. About Karen's son. I let him in. Gave him a Coke. Listened. And what he told me changed everything. Apparently, Karen's son had been charging neighborhood kids a fee to use the lawn track. My lawn. $5 a ride, or 10 if you wanted to record it and get featured on his TikTok. They called it the creep jump. Wait, I said slowly. That's why he spray painted that word on my porch. Mason nodded. Yeah, it was part of the brand. Creep Long Challenge. He was trying to make it go viral. I stared at him. Karen's son hadn't just been vandalizing my property. He'd been running a whole operation on it for money. And Karen, she either didn't know, or worse, she did. That evening, I checked the social accounts Mason mentioned. They were still up. Videos of my yard, my rocks, my home, edited with filters, loud music, laughing emojis, and hashtags like hashtag creep jump and hashtag old man lawn challenge. The worst part, one of the clips had over 87,000 views. That's when I made my decision. No more HOA meetings. No more emails. This wasn't about bylaws anymore. This was about reputation and justice. I burned a copy of every clip onto a USB, including the GoPro footage, the spray paint incident, the HOA meeting, and the accident. Then I called in a favor. Lena, my niece, worked in local news. She owed me one. Years ago, I helped her get a job out of college. I sent her everything, told her the full story. She called me 2 hours later, stunned. "You're telling me this? Karen vandalized your home, accused you of harassment, got the police involved, and her son turned your lawn into an underground viral challenge. All documented." She whistled. "This is gold." Within 24 hours, it aired. The segment was short, 2 minutes, but explosive. The title? Suburban Nightmare. Local mother's son turns neighbor's yard into online stunt track. Footage rolled. The crash. The spray paint. Karen yelling at HOA meetings. And finally, a voiceover when asked for comment, the homeowner across the street declined. But shortly after the story aired, the family put their house on the market and canceled all upcoming showings. And that's when the real fallout began. The next day, someone spray painted creep on Karen's own mailbox. By the afternoon, the for sale sign was gone, and so was Karen. A neighbor told me she'd left town late that night, loading her SUV. In silence, eyes covered by those same oversized sunglasses she always wore when she lied. But there was one last twist. 3 days later, city code enforcement knocked on my door. Not for me. For her, apparently. A neighbor tipped them off about something in Karen's backyard shed. Something that had been causing a strange smell for weeks. They opened it. Inside, dozens of empty gas cans, paint, a pile of broken bicycle parts, and in the corner, a box labeled creep merch. She was planning to sell it. She hadn't just been covering for her son. She was in on it the whole time. The shed discovery was the final nail. By the time code enforcement sent their official report to the city council, the entire neighborhood had already connected the dots. Karen's son may have been the face of the creep lawn challenge, but Karen was the brand manager, the editor, the enabler, and the one who had spray painted the name in the first place. There were receipts now. Literally boxes of cheap black hoodies with creep printed on the front had been found in her shed, alongside empty packaging slips. Her plan was simple: capitalize on her son's stunt, play the victim, and sell the narrative. But when that narrative shattered, so did her control. Local police had already reopened the investigation, not just into the vandalism, but into property damage, defamation, and what they now considered unlicensed business activity involving minors. And because it happened on my property, I was officially listed as the primary complainant. I didn't even have to testify. The videos did all the talking. She didn't fight the charges. Instead, Karen hired a lawyer who negotiated a quiet settlement. A public apology, full restitution for property damage, HOA penalties, and a legal agreement to vacate the neighborhood within 30 days. But the apology? That was the part I didn't expect. She recorded it on her phone, standing stiffly in her now empty front yard. No makeup, no sunglasses. Her voice cracked halfway through. To my neighbor across the street, she said, "I'm sorry for what my son and I put you through. I let things spiral. I blamed you for trying to protect your home. You were right. We were wrong." It was uploaded directly to the neighborhood Facebook group. Comments exploded immediately. "This should have happened months ago. He handled it better than any of us could have. I hope other parents are paying attention." Then, for the first time in weeks, I stepped onto my lawn. There were no tire marks, no shattered planters, no kids laughing behind a camera lens. Just clean grass, sunlight, and silence. That evening, something unexpected happened. My doorbell rang. I opened it to find a small group of neighbors, 5 families, all holding something. Potted plants, gardening tools, even a roll of fresh turf. "We figured," Tim said, smiling sheepishly, "if anyone's earned a fresh start for their yard, it's you." It wasn't about the grass anymore. It was about community. That Saturday, we worked together, replanting flower beds, fixing the edges, repainting the porch steps where Karen had once left her mark. Even Mason helped, digging holes and laying soil like he was making up for his friend's mistakes. By sunset, the yard looked better than it ever had. But the biggest surprise came. Later that night, a delivery truck pulled up just after dark. The driver stepped out, looked at my house, checked the clipboard, and rolled a large package onto my porch. I signed for it. Inside, a beat-up, bent dirt bike with a note attached. "We found this in Karen's garage. Thought you should have it. Consider it a trophy." No signature, no explanation. I dragged it to the edge of the lawn and stood there for a while, staring at the twisted handlebars and rusting chain. Then I flipped it over and stuck a small sign next to it. Not a garage, not a track. Lesson learned. Karen and her son were gone. The scars they left behind were healing on the lawn, in the neighborhood, and in the community that had watched it all unfold. And me? I finally sat down with my coffee, and watch the sunset on a lawn that no one else would ever ride. Across a gendot not without permission. Not ever then.